Many dream of owning an island, often picturing it in the Caribbean or South Pacific. But Gananoque, a small town on Ontario's St. Lawrence River, is part of the Thousand Islands region, where Canadians and Americans live on private islands, some with castles. These islands rival any tropical paradise, even without the warm climate. One famous tale from the area involves Thousand Island dressing, supposedly created by a local woman in the late 1800s before being given to a New York hotel. No written proof exists, but the legend endures. For years, I worked as a truck driver, delivering across the U.S. and Canada for a company with about 100 trucks. Drivers had some flexibility, long hauls, regional trips, or local deliveries. After a long stretch on the road, we could take a week of local driving to spend time with family. Occasionally, we could even bring our wives along. Long-haul trucking strains family life, second only to military service. I had spent summers working construction, which led to a full-time job after high school. By 23, I was a skilled carpenter. At 19, I met Rachel Simmons, an office clerk at a commercial bakery. We married at 21 and were happy, until the economy tanked. With construction slowing, we decided I should try trucking for better pay, despite the time away. The company paid for my CDL training in exchange for a year-long contract. 3 weeks later, I earned my Class A license and trained with a veteran driver. Though the program was 5 weeks, I convinced the safety department I was ready in 4. Once certified, I had Rachel pick up my paycheck every Friday, which worked well. 9 months in, my dispatcher, Linda, presented me with an opportunity. There's a load going to Vancouver, returning to Gananoque. The boss recently bought one of the Thousand Islands and wants his house furnished with handcrafted pieces from Vancouver Island. The furniture isn't due for a month, but we're surprising him with an early delivery. Then came the catch. You can't tell anyone, not even his wife. She picks up your check, and if she lets it slip, it'll ruin the surprise. She hesitated, then pressed, "Even if you don't take the job, do you promise to keep this secret?" I nodded. "I accept. I won't tell anyone." "Good. Since you're taking it, and because I like you. Have you seen that brand new Peterbilt in the yard?" "Of course." "Well, it's yours. Load your gear." Trailer 2353. Leave in the morning and call me when you get to Vancouver. Be careful. That night, I told Rachel I'd be gone for nearly 2 weeks. The money was good, but neither of us liked the time apart. We made the most of our last night together. Intimacy had never been an issue. Early in my trucking days, we took private photos, a reminder of home while I was on the road. I kept them stashed in my cab, never touched during border searches after the first time. Crossing into Canada was routine, border officials polite. Just as I settled into the trip, Linda called. My cargo had arrived early. After hours of loading, I began the long haul back. From Detroit, the drive to Montreal took about 9 hours. I parked overnight in Kingston and called Linda. The next morning at dawn, we transported the cargo to the island. The barge moved slowly through the water, weaving past dense forest. When I reached the guest house, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Rachel, my wife, lounging with the boss. He was rubbing something on her bare shoulders. Sunscreen? At first, I told myself I was mistaken. But as I got closer, the truth was undeniable. She wasn't his wife. She was mine. They froze when they saw me. Rachel's expression wavered between guilt and panic. The boss looked stunned. I didn't give them a chance to explain. Without a word, I turned and walked away. At the dock, reality hit. I was stuck on an island. Several boats were moored nearby, and taking one was my only escape. I had never driven a boat, but I had seen enough movies. After searching for keys, I started the engine and gunned it toward the mainland. The landing was rough, scraping the dock, but I didn't care. As soon as I hit solid ground, I left the boat drifting and made my way to Kingston Airport. Within the hour, I was on a flight to New York. Rachel had left one message. "Please call me back." I ignored it. Instead, I called Linda. "Morning, Ethan," she answered. "Did everything go okay?" I took a breath. "How long, Linda?" She hesitated. "How long what? How long has he been screwing my wife?" Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You heard me." Linda's tone shifted. Ethan, is she okay? Is she still there? How long? I demanded. Another pause. Then, finally, she exhaled. 3 months. I'm sorry, Ethan. His wife was supposed to be there. I never would have sent you if I had known. Her voice trailed off, but I had already stopped listening. So, you sent me there knowing the boss was screwing my wife? I demanded, my voice sharp with betrayal. Linda hesitated, then sighed. Only Mike and I knew. Well, thanks a damn lot, Linda. Really appreciate it. I snapped, my words dripping with sarcasm. Ethan, wait, where are you? What are you going to do? She asked, her voice suddenly anxious. Hold on, he's on the other line. Go to hell, I muttered, ending the call. Now it all made sense. Linda hadn't wanted me to tell Rachel about the trip because Rachel would have spilled to Pierce, and that would have ruined his little surprise. The bastard probably thought it was hilarious. At the airport, I kept scanning the small terminal, half expecting Rachel or Pierce to show up, but they never did. My flight was short, giving me too much time to think. Landing, I rented a car and drove 4 hours straight home. The apartment was empty. I had no plan, no idea what I was going to do, but my thoughts raced, twisting into anger, hurt, and disbelief. My phone buzzed. Another voicemail. Ethan, if you're home, I'm on my way. Please don't do anything until we talk. We never actually had sex. We just fooled around. Please believe me. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Did she really think I was that stupid? At the apartment, I packed my pickup truck with everything I wanted. Clothes, important papers, anything that mattered to me. Once everything was loaded, I drove straight to the trucking terminal. Linda and Mike were there. The second they saw me, they avoided eye contact. How much does the company owe me, Linda? I asked, my voice cold and unwavering. Ethan, write me a check. Now. She hesitated, wringing her hands. Mr. Pierce said not to pay you until he talks to you. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, so he had plenty to say, huh? What? Was he bragging about screwing my wife? Did you all sit around and have a good laugh at my expense? She flinched. Ethan, he also said you wrecked one of his boats. You don't say. Well, write me my damn check, or I'll wreck this whole office instead. She swallowed hard and made the call to accounting. After a few minutes, I had my check in hand. I glanced at it, then changed my mind. Transfer it to my card. But Ethan, do it. Now. She hesitated, but after a moment, they complied. A direct deposit meant Pierce couldn't stop the payment. Leaving the terminal, I drove straight to Pierce's house. It wasn't my first time there. We'd once had a company picnic on the lawn. Guess my wife had been there for more than just picnics. Mrs. Pierce answered the door. She looked pale, her eyes dull and sunken. What can I do for you? She asked, her voice weak. My name's Ethan Carter. I used to work for your husband, I said bluntly. This morning, I delivered furniture to your island and found him rubbing sunscreen on my wife's bare chest, while his other hand was somewhere it shouldn't have been. Thought you should know. Have a nice day. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Wait, what's your wife's name? Rachel Carter. And you saw this today? With my own damn eyes. She stood frozen, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, but I didn't wait. I walked away, climbed into my truck, and drove off. With nowhere else to go, I headed to my parents' house. They took one look at me and knew something was wrong. After I explained everything, Mom shook her head in disgust. Dad just clenched his jaw. Mom handed me a cup of coffee. You'll figure this out, honey. Just take a moment to breathe. I nodded, exhausted. The couch felt too inviting, and I stretched out, eyes heavy. The next thing I heard was my father's voice, firm and unwavering. Rachel, get off my porch, or I'll call the police. But I need to talk to Ethan, she pleaded, her voice raw with desperation. After what you did to him, no chance. He doesn't understand. Oh, I think he understands just fine. You slept with his boss for 3 months. What more is there to know? But he doesn't know why. Dad scoffed. Of course he knows. You're a damn traitor, that's why. Now, leave. She started screaming my name. Ethan, please. Just talk to me. Give me a chance. I barely heard her. Exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke early, still unsure where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay. As I walked to my truck, I stopped cold. Rachel was curled up in the passenger seat, fast asleep. She stirred when she heard me open the door. I turned to walk away, but she grabbed my hand. "Ethan, please, just listen," she begged. I had no choice. I yanked my hand away. "You either sleep with someone, or you don't. Which is it, Rachel?" Her face crumpled. Everything was wrong. "So, you chose to do it. Ethan, just give me a chance." I stared at her. "You chose to do it," I repeated. Tears welled in her eyes. "Okay, I did. But listen, we never actually had sex. We just fooled around a little." I scoffed. "Jesus, do you really expect me to believe that? Please, Ethan, get out of my truck." She didn't move. I grabbed her wrist, pulled her out, and slammed the door. I drove off before she could get up. At a fast food joint, I ordered breakfast, ignoring the ringing phone. After eating, I went straight to the bank and split our accounts. More missed calls. More voicemails. One from Pierce. "Call me, or I'll sue you for the boat. And you'll go to jail for threatening my employees. Don't think I won't do it." Then another. "Listen, I slept with your wife. Deal with it." I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles turned white. The bastard wasn't just smug. He wanted me to know he had one. I had no idea what my next move was. But one thing was for damn sure. I was done. This happens every day. She's not the first wife I've spent time with, and she won't be the last. Swallow your pride. Take her back, punish her if necessary. That's what she likes and wants. If you don't, maybe I'll keep doing it. Now get back here and drive my truck home, or I'll report you for theft. Plus, you owe me 3 more months for your truck driving school. God, what an arrogant idiot. He was still in Canada, thinking he had total control over me. I wasn't going back, but I knew someone who might want to hear what he had to say. Instead of heading straight to his house again, I called Mrs. Pierce and asked if we could meet. She agreed, and when we sat down, I played his messages for her. Her already sickly complexion paled further. "At first, I wasn't sure I believed you," she admitted. "But now I do. I'm going to make his life hell. Want a copy?" I asked. "Absolutely." We made a copy, and as she took it, she asked, "What are you going to do about your wife?" "Divorce, of course. I just don't know how to approach it yet," I admitted. "It's simple," she said without hesitation. "Find a good lawyer and hire him." It sounded so straightforward when she said it. I left her house and returned to my parents, where they asked me the same question. When I gave them the same answer, my father repeated Mrs. Pierce's words almost verbatim. That was enough to convince me. I had no clue where to start, so I flipped open the phone book and began with A. I got to D before I found my guy, Gregory Dalton. We hit it off immediately. His entire family had been truck drivers, but a car accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. That's when he pivoted to law school. Now, he was the only one in his family who wasn't on the road, but he still understood the industry inside and out. More importantly, he knew exactly who Nathan T. Pierce was. Dalton had nothing but praise for the man, commenting on his youth, business acumen, and standing in the community. Pierce was well known, sponsoring sports teams, funding arts programs, and donating to every charity that came his way. He was the golden boy of the town. Dalton didn't believe me at first. He thought I was just another bitter guy looking for revenge. I could tell he was about to turn me away. Then I played the messages. His expression shifted. When they ended, he exhaled slowly. "Wow," he muttered. "If this gets out, it's going to shake up the entire community." "That's not my goal," I replied. "I just want a divorce, as clean and cheap as possible. I don't care if word spreads, but I won't let anyone sugarcoat what happened. There won't be any irreconcilable differences crap." She cheated. It needs to be recorded as such. Dalton leaned back in his chair, thinking. It might be tough if those messages are all we have. Courts today practically require visual evidence, especially when the accused is someone like Pierce. Let's try it anyway, I decided. All right, we'll serve her the papers in the next few days. Do you know where she might be? At the bakery where she works, at home, or in Canada with him. We can't serve her in Canada, so we'll try home and work first, he noted. That works for me, I agreed. You can reach me on my cell or at my parents' house. I was getting restless living at my parents' place, so I spent the next few days looking for an apartment. I found one. Not the best, not the worst, but it was mine. A week later, Rachel was served at work. Meanwhile, my dad, who owned a small welding shop, convinced me to start working with him just to get me out of my apartment. Both he and Mom thought I was spending too much time brooding indoors. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I gave it a shot. Dad had a pickup truck equipped with portable welding tools, mostly repairing equipment for local businesses. Occasionally, a client would request something custom, and he'd take care of that too. Rachel tried to talk to me several times after she was served, but everything had to go through our lawyers. Our first meeting was about a month later. Of course, her lawyer immediately tried to get the infidelity charge thrown out. I refused. Pierce was named in the divorce petition, and Rachel was desperate to keep his name out of it. This could ruin his reputation in society, she objected. He doesn't deserve that. I lost it. Are you serious? He's a wife-stealing snake. He deserves every bit of exposure he gets. Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. If you'd treated your wife better, maybe he wouldn't have been able to steal me. That set off a heated argument that got so bad. We had to be put in separate rooms to cool off. When we returned, she tried again. Please, Ethan, just take his name off the paperwork. I crossed my arms. Not happening. Why are you trying so hard to protect him? Are you planning to marry him? Still sleeping with him? She lifted her chin defiantly. Yes to both. Her lawyer groaned, dropping his head into his hands. Rachel, he muttered, you just admitted to infidelity. In front of your husband and 2 legal witnesses. She shrugged. I don't care. Then, turning back to me, she added, and just so you know, yeah, I'm marrying him. As soon as he gets divorced. I almost laughed. So you think he loves you? Of course he does, she snapped. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my messages, and placed it on the table in front of her. That's not what he says. Her face paled. Dalton chuckled, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table to Rachel. She hesitated before picking it up. As she read, I watched her expression shift from confusion to horror. Dalton smirked. You might want to rethink those wedding plans, Mrs. Carter. Rachel's lawyer intercepted the envelope before she could open it, carefully scanning the contents, a note and a series of photographs. Rachel, her hands trembling slightly, took the photos first. Her face hardened as she flipped through them. Then she read the note aloud. Mr. Carter, these may help with your divorce. The first 5 were taken on the island 3 weeks ago. Your boss with his hairdresser's wife. The next 6 were from last week while I was away. He picked up a woman at a bar. Just another fling, like your wife. Thought you should know. The note was signed Vanessa. The pictures left no room for doubt. Pierce with both women, captured in compromising positions that erased any question of his infidelity. Rachel stared at them for a long moment, then silently pushed them back and stood. Without a word, she left the room. I didn't see her again until court, where everything was split. Money, jewelry, china, her clothes. She stayed in our old apartment, while I walked away free. Pierce's reputation crumbled fast. His sponsorships disappeared. His sports teams folded, and Vanessa, armed with those photographs, took him for everything. Half of his wealth, half of his moving company, and their home. The only thing he managed to keep was the Canadian island, which Vanessa didn't want. Still thinking he had the upper hand, he sent a bill to my lawyer, demanding I repay the cost of my truck driving school. Dalton's response was colorful. Vanessa called shortly after, telling me to disregard the demand entirely. She also offered me a job as an operations manager at a trucking company she now co-owned. It was tempting, but I turned it down. Instead, I stayed in the welding shop with my dad. Over time, I found I had a knack for metalwork. Welding and fabricating became second nature, and soon I was crafting more than just repairs, weather vanes, mailbox stands, decorative ironwork. Pierce's business eventually folded, and Vanessa disappeared from town. Occasionally, I'd see Pierce around, but he never recognized me. Maybe he blocked out everything that had happened. Maybe he didn't want to remember. Either way, I didn't care. One quiet Sunday, Rachel showed up at the shop. "Can we talk?" she asked, standing just outside the doorway. "I have nothing to say," I replied without looking up. "Just listen," she pleaded. I sighed, setting my tools down. "Fine." She hesitated, as if unsure where to start. "I have no excuse," she admitted. "We had a good life. Money, love, everything we needed. So, why Pierce?" "Partly because of his lies. He told me you didn't love me, that you were probably cheating on the road. He said all truckers do." I stayed silent. "Linda fed into it," she continued. "Told me Pierce treated me better than you ever had. And I believed it. Mrs. Pierce. She said he had affairs, but that it helped their marriage. More lies. But I fell for it." I took a breath, keeping my emotions in check. "Why tell me all this now?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I didn't even think I'd tell you the truth. I wanted to create a story where all of this was your fault. I even had some excuses ready. But when I saw you today, I realized I couldn't lie to you anymore." I studied her, searching for any trace of the woman I had once loved. "What did you hope to gain from this?" "Nothing," she said softly. "I just needed you to know it wasn't your fault. None of it was. It was my selfish choices, my willingness to believe his stories. Whether you believe me or not, I never stopped loving you." I shook my head. "No, I don't believe that. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied, cheated, and then planned to marry him." Her lips pressed together, her eyes brimming with something unreadable. "Are you still seeing him?" I asked. She exhaled sharply. "No, I haven't seen him since the day in the lawyer's office. The moment I saw those pictures, I knew everything he told me was a lie." Silence settled between us. She lingered for another moment, then finally stood. "I guess I should go," she said quietly. Then, after a deep breath, "Ethan, is there any way you could forgive me? Give me another chance?" I met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "You know where the door is." She nodded, looking away as she left. After she was gone, I sat in silence, reflecting on my ex-wife and ex-boss. If I hadn't caught them on that island, would I still be trucking, still trying to make things work with a woman who had already given up on me? Would I have just accepted whatever was left? I was glad I hadn't. One day, a flyer arrived in the mail for a Renaissance festival. I had never been to one before, but curiosity got the best of me. Maryland, apparently, considered jousting and lacrosse its official sports. I attended a festival nearby, and what I saw fascinated me. Vendors selling handcrafted armor, swords, and shields. The craftsmanship spoke to me. Inspired, I researched medieval blacksmithing techniques and started making my own pieces. At first, it was just a hobby. Then I started selling my work at festivals across the country. A man named Jake Wallace helped me market my pieces, and before I knew it, I had a new business. One of my most challenging projects was repairing a wrought iron gate for a local businessman, Mr. William Foster. His daughter, Lily, would bring me iced tea while I worked, and we talked more than I expected. Sometime later, while at the cinema, I saw her again. She was with a boyfriend, though it didn't look like a happy date. Minutes after they arrived, I heard her snap, "If you touch me there again, I'll cut off your balls." Her boyfriend's hand instantly dropped from her shoulder. I wasn't close enough to hear the argument that followed, but it was clear she was not putting up with him. I decided to step in, something I'd never done before. "Excuse me, Lily," I said as I approached. "Are you okay?" She turned, recognizing me after a moment. Her face was tense. "No, that guy has more arms than an octopus, and I'm sick of it. Can you give me a ride home?" "Of course." As we walked to my truck, another man appeared. "Lily, are you okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Now I am, yes." "Do you want me to take you home?" he offered. She didn't even glance at me before saying, "Yes." Without another word, she walked off with him, leaving me standing there as if I were invisible. I watched them drive away, shook my head, and went home. A few days later, I was back at her house for another job, this time, repairing railings along the walkway. Mr. Foster had asked me to return. I had no idea what to expect. Lily saw me and walked over to say hello, acting like nothing had happened. I wasn't in the mood to talk, still annoyed about how she had ignored me at the theater. She picked up on my mood and left without another word. The next day, I returned with spare parts for the railings. As I worked, Lily passed by on her way to the pool and stopped to chat. I mostly ignored her, still irritated by what had happened. "Are you mad at me?" she finally asked. I put down my tools. "Do you remember what happened at the movies last week?" "You mean with the octopus guy?" she asked. "Yeah. What about it? You asked me for a ride home. Remember that?" "Of course," she said. "What happened after that?" "Nothing. Jimmy showed up and took me home. And you didn't see anything wrong with that?" She frowned. "No. Was there?" I let out a dry chuckle and shook my head. "Not if you didn't see anything wrong with it, I guess." I grabbed my hammer and started making noise, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. "I don't get you," she muttered, frustrated. I met her eyes. "That's the problem." She stared at me for a moment before walking away. The rest of the day, I focused on finishing the railings. My interest in metalwork was growing, and I started experimenting with crafting armor. After making my first piece, I sent a photo to Jake. "Stick with shields and swords," he texted back, laughing. "Armor's a lot harder to sell." A few nights later, I was at a bar watching a baseball game when Lily walked in. She spotted me and, after a moment, walked over. "I'm meeting some friends for drinks," she said. "Want to join us?" I didn't even look at her. "No thanks. I'm good here." She hesitated, then turned to leave but stopped. "Are you ever going to tell me what I did to make you mad?" I took a sip of my beer. "If I have to explain it, I feel sorry for you. Enjoy your drinks." She left, but just as I was about to go, she returned, looking remorseful. "Oh my God, Ethan. I didn't mean to ignore you. That guy pissed me off so much that I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't even realize what I did. Please, accept my apology." I figured someone at her table had clued her in. "Apology accepted," I said. She smiled. "Will you join us now? Just for one drink?" I considered it, then nodded. "Sure." The evening turned out to be enjoyable. Two of her friends teased her, reminding her to be more mindful. By the end of the night, I found myself feeling sympathetic toward her. As the group started to disperse, I sat next to a woman named Melissa and asked about Lily. "She regrets how she treated you," Melissa said. "She told all of us that." "She actually told you guys?" I asked. "Yep. You have to give her credit for that. Do you have her number?" Melissa shook her head. "No, but give me your phone." I handed it over, and she entered Lily's number. "Call her," she suggested. A week later, Lily walked into my store. She must have gotten the address from her father. "Did you have fun last time?" she asked. "I did. Your friends are great," I replied. "That's good," she said. "What about me? Do you like me?" I chuckled. "I remember you apologized." "Yeah, I did," she said. "That's a good start." "Then why aren't we friends?" I smiled. "I think we're working on it. An apology doesn't automatically make us best friends. It just means you realized you made a mistake and regret it. I accepted yours, but that doesn't mean we're suddenly close. It just means I acknowledge that you understand what you did and feel sorry for it, assuming you were sincere." "I was," she assured me. "I believe you." "Good. So, let's go out to dinner." I laughed. "Why not? It'll be a good step in building our friendship," she added playfully. "All right. When? How about tonight?" And so it was. That dinner led to another, and another. Over the next few months, our relationship grew. At first, we were just friends, but soon, we became inseparable. She would stop by the shop just to be around me. We didn't always talk. Sometimes, she'd read while I worked. But just being together felt right. One night, lying in bed, she told me something unexpected. "I was married once," she admitted. I turned to face her. "You never mentioned that before." "It was brief. And that's not the surprising part," she said, her voice quieter. I sat up slightly. "What is?" She exhaled. "Benjamin Foster isn't my biological father." I stayed quiet, waiting for her to continue. "My mom was married before him," she explained. "She and my dad were together for 7 years before he passed away. I have an older brother. He was 6 years older than me. When our dad died, he took over the family trucking company. How old was he? 21, she said. Everyone doubted him, but my mom and I believed in him, and he proved everyone wrong. The business thrived. I poured us both a drink and handed her one. Tell me more about your brother. She nodded. The company did really well. So well, in fact, that he and my ex-sister-in-law bought an island in Canada. I froze slightly. Then she added, some woman got her hooks into him, and he ended up divorced. Eventually, he sold the company. Supposedly, this woman's husband started driving for him, thinking they could make money together. But she wormed her way in and seduced him. I stared at her, my grip tightening around the glass. She had no idea. I downed my drink, because I knew exactly who her brother was. They set it up so her husband would catch them together on the island, she said. My sister-in-law divorced my brother, took half the company, and they had to sell. What a pair of thieves. I downed my drink in one gulp, feeling a surge of anger. How much did they extort from him? He never told me, but they got something, she replied, looking away. Do you remember their names? I pressed. I did, but I've forgotten, she admitted. I decided to be honest with her, even though I knew it might end our relationship. But first, I wanted one last night together. Afterward, as I lay beside her, I almost talked myself out of it. The connection we had was undeniable, and I knew that revealing the truth could destroy it. Still, I dressed, sat on the edge of the bed, and spoke. It's time we revisited your brother's divorce. Was what you told me his version, or the official story? It's what he told me, so I took it as truth. Why? She asked, eyes narrowing. Because it happened completely differently, I replied. Her expression hardened. What do you mean? I recounted the events as they had truly unfolded. Halfway through, she got out of bed, standing there naked, her arms crossed, listening intently. When I finished, I said, Rachel and I ended things in divorce, not extortion. You're lying, she snapped, reaching for a pillow and hurling it at me. Get out and don't come back with these lies. I left, disheartened by the bitter end, but holding on to the memory of our final night together. Life moved forward, though I found myself in another social lull, struggling to climb out of it. One evening, feeling indulgent, I treated myself to a nice dinner at a fancy restaurant. As I finished my meal, I noticed Lily and her brother celebrating a birthday at a nearby table. Impulsively, I paid my bill and walked over, pulling out a chair to sit with them. They both stared at me, stunned. Her brother broke the silence first. Are you sure you're at the right table? He asked, clearly not recognizing me. I am, I replied calmly. And I think it's time you told your sister the truth about your divorce. She deserves to know what really happened. His face twisted with irritation. Who the hell are you? You need to set the record straight, I insisted. Freak you, he shot back, his eyes blazing. Ethan, what are you doing? Lily nearly shouted. Get out of here. Just then, a waiter approached. Is everything all right here? He asked politely. Lily pointed at me. This guy sat down uninvited and started harassing my brother. I want him gone. The waiter turned to me. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I looked back at her brother, holding his glare. You're something else. Just go, Lily demanded. I left, knowing this was likely the end of whatever we had. Back in my shop, I poured myself into crafting axes and chainmail, preparing for an upcoming festival. Jake helped me secure a vendor pass and introduced me to Emily, who wore a stunning period gown that drew every eye. Emily, meet Ethan, Jake said, beaming. Ethan makes our best pieces, and he's got some new ones today. Nice to meet you, I said, fetching my latest creations from the truck. Jake and Emily examined my work with admiration, and we spent the day enjoying the festival's lively atmosphere. I wanted to ask Jake more about Emily, but the opportunity never came. Later, Jake mentioned that she and her sister organized festivals across the country. If you hadn't shown up, she would have handled this one herself, he added. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I would have found a motel, I replied. Wouldn't have mattered. All booked up, he said with a grin. The festival was a success. Emily was a hit with the crowd, and we sold out our inventory. Encouraged by our profits, Jake convinced me to stay another night before heading home. After returning, I dove into crafting chainmail, pushing myself to create enough stock for our next event. Around 3 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Lily, disheveled and drunk, with 2 police officers in tow. "Are you Ethan Carter?" one of them asked. "Yes," I answered cautiously. "She claims you're her boyfriend," the officer stated. I shook my head. "I know her, but she's not my girlfriend. Last time I saw her, she called me a liar and kicked me out of her house." "We're planning to take her in for the night," the officer said. I glanced at Lily, her eyes glassy and pleading. "No, don't do that. I'll take care of her," I offered. "Are you sure?" "No," I admitted, "but I can't let her spend the night in a cell." The officers left, and I guided her inside, settling her on my bed. With no other option, I ended up sleeping on the couch, which, despite its discomfort, was better than the air mattress in Jake's tent. The next morning, I went to work early, half expecting her to still be there when I returned. But she was gone. The apartment was spotless, and there wasn't a single note left behind. Work consumed me, and Jake came by to pick up the shields, swords, and axes I'd finished. We discussed the growing workload and the need for extra hands. Finding skilled metalworkers was tough, so we decided to advertise for trainees, placing ads in the local paper and festival newsletters. One Friday evening, as I toiled in the workshop, a new idea began to take shape, an invention to speed up chainmail production. With every ring I linked, I wondered if it was the start of something big or just another project to keep my mind off everything else. Late at night, exhausted from a long day of work, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Lily stood there, looking sober but hesitant. "Thank you for rescuing me from the police," she said softly. I nodded. "Everything's okay." She lingered in the doorway, clearly searching for the right words. I sighed. "Listen, it's been a long day, and I need to get some sleep." Gently moving past her, I closed and locked the door, heading toward my car. "Good night," I said. As I opened the car door, she spoke again. "You were right. My brother lied. I'm sorry." I didn't turn around. I just waved over my shoulder, got in, and drove off. Armor making had become an obsession. After Jake critiqued my first attempt, I spent hours researching medieval techniques and refining my process. Eventually, I completed a new suit that became my model for future designs. It was painstaking work, requiring hours of forging, shaping, and fitting, but I relished the challenge. At the next festival, we decided not to sell the armor outright, but instead use it as a showcase piece. Visitors admired it, asked questions, and those serious about purchasing discussed custom orders. The response was overwhelming. It became clear that my work was respected, and more importantly, it was profitable. Festival success led me to invest in a trailer to transport my tools and materials, allowing me to move between events without hassle. Some days, I worked the booth, interacting with customers. Other times, I crafted in the vendor area, hammering out new projects. It was an unexpected but fulfilling career shift. Between festivals, I talked with my father about how bizarre it was that Renaissance metalwork had taken off. Who would have thought people would pay this much for armor? I mused. "This stuff isn't cheap." "People love history," he replied, "and they love feeling like they're a part of it." After festival season, I considered upgrading my truck and stopped by a local dealership. While browsing, I struck up a conversation with a woman getting her car serviced. She was easy to talk to, and by the time we left, we had exchanged numbers. A week later, we went on our first date. One evening, after I drove her home, she invited me inside. We had another drink, and as I settled onto her couch, she stood in front of me and started unbuttoning her blouse. "Do you mind if I get more comfortable?" she asked, a playful smile on her lips. "Not at all, as long as I get to watch and enjoy," I replied. She grinned. "That's the whole idea. I undress while you watch. Then you undress while I watch. Then we have lovemaking, hoping it won't end too quickly. Seems like you've planned this out." "Oh, absolutely." As her blouse hit the floor and her skirt followed, I reached for her, but she gently pushed my hands away. "Let me handle this," she murmured. "Just watch and enjoy." "You do like watching a woman undress?" don't you? I smirked. Never really paid attention before. She let out a deep, throaty laugh. I hope you're better in bed than you are at lying. The night stretched on, slow and deliberate. I left around 3 in the morning, and the whole drive home, I found myself comparing her to Lily. The last time Lily and I were together lingered in my mind. I couldn't decide who had been better. The relationship lasted 4 months before we amicably parted ways. Later that evening, I noticed several missed calls and a message from Lily. Ethan, please call me as soon as you get this. No matter what time it is. Taking her at her word, I dialed. She answered after 2 rings. Hello, Ethan, she said, her voice groggy. I woke you up. I think I dozed off waiting for your call. All right, I'm calling. What's so urgent? I wanted you to know my brother lied about his divorce. You were right. I'm sorry. You already apologized for that. Is there something else? There was a pause. Yes. Another silence. Can we see each other again? I miss you, she admitted. I sighed. Lily, there's no way you and I can be together, knowing who your brother is and what he did with my wife. If we got serious, it would inevitably cause problems with him, and I'd never be comfortable with that. I won't put myself through it. I heard her breath hitch, then a quiet sniffle. I knew you'd say that, she whispered, her voice cracking, but I hoped you wouldn't. Goodbye, Ethan. Festival season returned, and I hit the road. I secured vendor passes, bought camping gear, and traveled from event to event. Most of my time was spent helping Jake at his booth, and when I wasn't selling, I was crafting new items. My armor-making skills had improved significantly in the off-season, and at nearly every festival, we managed to sell at least one full suit. The demand was high, but each piece took weeks to complete, making them a rarity. One Friday evening, I found myself in the workshop, perfecting my process and tinkering with a new project, an invention to speed up chainmail production. I had seen a few machines on the market, but they were inefficient, requiring too much manual input. If I could refine the design, I might finally be able to keep up with the rising demand for chainmail armor. I worked late into the night, sketching out ideas, adjusting metal components, and running test links through a prototype. The rhythmic clinking of metal was oddly soothing, keeping my mind occupied. There were still moments when my thoughts drifted back to Lily, how things had ended, how much time we had spent together, how quickly it had unraveled. I wondered if she ever regretted pushing me away. Not that it mattered anymore. I had moved on, or at least, I was trying to. I agreed to join Jake at the next festival, and since he was nearby, he brought his trailer with all the supplies I needed. Leaving mine behind, I loaded up my truck and hit the road, working 3 festivals back-to-back. By the third, my chainmail machine demonstration was attracting quite a bit of attention. The next event on my schedule was a major one near Philadelphia, lasting 11 days, one of the largest in the country. Unlike the usual weekend festivals, this one ran from Thursday through the following weekend and stretched into the next. Knowing I had to be fully stocked, I spent 2 weeks at home preparing, focusing heavily on armor. My father had become skilled at crafting shields, axes, and swords, and together we worked late into the night to get everything ready. One of those nights, well past midnight, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Lily, completely intoxicated, practically falling into my arms. 2 police officers stood behind her. "Is this your girlfriend?" one of them asked. I glanced at Lily, who was barely standing. If it keeps her out of trouble tonight, I guess so. I half-guided, half-carried her to my bedroom and dropped her onto the bed. Not knowing if this would become a habit, I set out fresh clothes for the next day. In the morning, I checked on her. She was still asleep, looking peaceful, as if she hadn't spent the night stumbling around town. I debated whether to stay and talk or just let it go. In the end, I chose to go about my day as usual. That evening, when I returned home, the entire house was spotless. Lily had cleaned everything. The floors, the counters, even the kitchen sink sparkled. In the bathroom, my toothbrush and toothpaste had been moved. Both were damp, as was the washcloth on the sink. I grabbed a frozen enchilada, heated it up, and tried to eat, but I wasn't really hungry. The following morning, I left for the Philadelphia Festival, bringing along everything I needed for shields and chainmail demonstrations. The first day was incredible, and each day only got better. By Sunday, a large crowd watched me work for hours, captivated by the detailed process of assembling chainmail. By the end of the day, Jake and I were completely drained. The vendor area was always lively at night. People cooking over open fires, drinking, rehearsing sword fights, trying on armor, or tending to horses. It wasn't uncommon to hear the sounds of intimacy from inside tents or see a camper gently swaying. As I sat outside my tent, I found myself longing for someone to share my space. Lily was probably free, but I couldn't bring myself to call her. Monday's turnout was steady. While demonstrating my craft, I glanced up and spotted Lily watching me. She stood quietly at the edge of the crowd. I continued my demonstration, answering a few questions. As the spectators drifted away, she remained. "You enjoy doing this?" she asked. "Yeah, I do," I replied. "You're good at it," she said. Then, without another word, she disappeared into the crowd. I didn't see her again until the festival ended. On Wednesday, my parents arrived with additional shields and axes. I gave them a tour, though they didn't seem entirely pleased with my career choice. My mother, in particular, frowned at my tent setup, disapproving of my choice to sleep on site. The rest of the festival went well. Jake and I returned home satisfied with our sales, and I took a rare day off. My father helped with some chainmail production in the shop while I discussed plans for a larger motorhome and trailer. Then the door opened, and Lily walked in. "This festival was a blast," she said excitedly. "A few friends and I are heading to the next one nearby. We even talked about going in armor." "Sounds like fun," I replied vaguely, focusing on my work. "Will you be there?" she asked. "Probably." My father and I continued working, avoiding eye contact with her. "Can I come with you?" she asked. "Not very practical since I'll be there from Wednesday to Sunday," I said. "No worries, we can get a motel room," she suggested. "Highly unlikely. Those book up months in advance." "Where do you sleep?" she asked. "In a tent." She smirked. "That sounds cozy. Maybe we could share." "It's a small tent," I replied. "Small ones can be cozy," she said, inching closer. My father, who had been quietly listening, grinned and excused himself from the room. Lily lowered her voice. "Listen, you'll never forget that my brother had an affair with your wife, so we can't have a serious relationship. But that doesn't mean we can't be friends with benefits, right?" I stared at her. "We enjoy lovemaking together," she continued. "So why not just use each other? You can date whoever you want, but if you're not getting any action, I can help. What do you say?" I studied her carefully. "You're amazing, Lily, and I've said it before. But the idea of sharing doesn't sit well with me. I can't just have lovemaking with you, knowing you might leave for someone else, even if you haven't yet. We both deserve real relationships and to respect them." She stepped closer, touching my face. "You don't get it. I'm already in a relationship," she whispered. "If you want to date others, go ahead. Just know I'll always be here for whatever you need, whenever you need it. I don't need anyone else. I love you, and I fully intend to honor this arrangement." She kissed me again and then walked out. My father must have been watching, because the second the door shut, he turned to me. "What are you going to do about her?" he asked. I kept staring at the door she had just walked through, uncertain. "I honestly don't know, Dad. What do you think?" "You've got two choices," he said simply. "Either come to terms with the fact that her brother had an affair with your ex-wife and accept that she's sticking around, or leave town and keep a low profile." I sighed. "Maybe it's time to consider what you and Mom talked about." "We'll discuss it when we get home," he said. At dinner, he filled my mother in on Lily, and they exchanged a knowing glance. "So, maybe it's time we gave Ethan that gift we talked about," my father said. "I think you might be right," she agreed. "What gift?" I asked, suspicious. "I don't like the idea of you sleeping in a tent at these festivals," my mother said. "We're buying you a motorhome," my father announced. Arguing was pointless. The idea was practical, and I had to admit, I liked it. It took a week to find exactly what I wanted. Since I already had a Class A CDL, I didn't need any lessons. I hugged them both, thanked them, and bought a trailer to tow behind it. Setting up the trailer to serve as a mobile workshop was the final touch, allowing me to craft armor while my father continued working on shields, swords, and axes. When Jake saw my new setup, he grinned. So, have you christened it yet? I frowned. What do you mean? Have you had lovemaking in it yet? He clarified. I laughed. No. His grin widened. Mind if Emily and I? I chuckled. Go right ahead. Emily arrived 10 minutes later. Jake took her hand, and they disappeared inside. When they returned, both were laughing. We wanted you to be the first to know, he said. Emily and I are getting married. She hugged me. It was your van that clinched it, she teased. That weekend, I barely saw them, but when I stepped into the van, the lingering scent of perfume and more confirmed their enthusiasm. Back home, Lily spotted the van and dropped by. I hadn't been with anyone in a while, and I knew I could get her into bed if I wanted to. Giving her a tour, I watched her reaction. This is much better than a tent, she said, admiring the space. Definitely, I agreed. It's got a double bed, doesn't it? Yep. And I bet this shower can fit too, she mused. Probably. We stood in the van's living area when she stepped closer. Has it been christened yet? She asked coyly. I played dumb. What do you mean? Has anyone had lovemaking in it yet? No, I fibbed. It's brand new. She smirked. Well, we could do it now, or this weekend. Since we were in my parents' yard, now wasn't an option. What do you mean this weekend? I asked. After the festival ends each evening, we could slip away, she suggested. This one's in Southern Virginia, I said. Too far for you to drive back and forth. You're right, she conceded. So, I'll just come with you. Did you not hear what I just said? She tugged at my shirt, pulling me closer. Ethan, you admitted I'm the best you've ever had. And you're the best I've ever had. Her voice softened. Plus, I'm in love with you. And I know you like me more than just a little. We should just have lovemaking whenever we can. She pressed against me, her breath warm on my neck. Also, I have a dress that would be perfect for the festival. Everyone will love it. Especially you. She kissed me softly, as if she truly meant every word. I exhaled. I'm leaving at 5 in the morning on Tuesday. I won't wait for you. You don't have to. And she was right. By midnight Monday, she had unpacked her clothes and stocked the kitchen. When I woke up on Tuesday morning, she was already curled up in the van's bed, looking completely at home. As soon as I got behind the wheel, she appeared in the passenger seat wearing only a robe. Every time I glanced at her, she smirked. At the festival, she met Emily, and both of them wore low-cut dresses that turned heads. The workday felt excruciatingly long, and by closing time, I couldn't wait to return to the van. Inside, Emily and Lily were cooking dinner. I had never tasted Lily's cooking before, but it was delicious. After Jake and Emily left, Lily leaned against the counter. Want a shower with me? The shower was small, but it was big enough for two. And from there, we moved to the bed. That night marked the start of many spent in that van together. That was 3 years ago. At first, her family tried to convince her that I was only letting her travel with me to spite her brother. He had convinced them that Rachel and I were the cause of his divorce, not him. None of them had been in court to hear the truth, and just like Lily, they believed him. Lily proved them wrong. She provided copies of my divorce decree and her ex-sister-in-law's statements. The truth was clear. Meanwhile, her brother stayed in town long enough to be responsible for a couple more divorces before deciding to move across the country. It seemed he figured it was better for his health. Now, Lily has several new dresses for the festivals, ones that don't highlight her belly as much. She never said she wanted to be a wife before becoming a mother, but I know it's on her mind. It's on my mind too.